Welcome to the SpartanMag.com VCast from Comparoni. Paul Konyndyk. Spartan Stadium, Michigan State destroyed by Washington today, 41-7. And Paul, we could visualize this being a possibility, being one of the scenarios today. We saw it last year against Washington. We talked about it during spring practice and last week, that what Michigan State does from here, beginning with the Maryland game, is going to determine where the season goes. And we've always thought that. We've always said that. That being said, I expected Michigan State's offense to show up today and be able to run the ball. And you and I have agreed that the Maryland game was going to be the true litmus in terms of giving a better indicator of what happens the rest of the season. But I'm more concerned about Michigan State's ability to beat Maryland and prove next week that they can win and put something together this season after this and what we saw on offense. The defense, yeah, Washington came out and rolled up more yards against Michigan State than anybody and any team that Michigan State has played in Michigan State history. It's a great offense, great quarterback, great wide receiver, great scheme. We talked about that. Problem is Michigan State couldn't really answer and possess the ball on their own. You know, I think we knew that Washington could score 40. They could have scored 70 if they wanted to today, but they could score 40. The question is whether Michigan State could answer and maybe score 28, which would keep them in the 30s potentially. But unnerving, disturbing game for Michigan State in terms of the rest of this season, and it's only September. And obviously, Harlon Barnett, we'll have to talk about what it means for him and what they need to do, but a lot to unwrap there, Paul. I kind of went overboard. Sorry about that.
Yeah, I mean, any scenario where this game was going to be competitive would have Michigan State matching Washington score for score, or at least, close to it. Michigan State getting the first kickoff. They started moving the ball. They started out with, got a favorable field position with a penalty or whatnot, up at the 35, and then a small little thing like not getting a chip block or a little hedge or whatever you want to call it on a defensive end, or it was a linebacker, I believe, but on a linebacker coming on a blitz, hit your quarterback from behind. It should have been a fumble. They call it a sack, whatever, but that's a huge loss. If you get a chip, if you're Spencer Brown and you get a chip on him, that could be a completed pass. It might be a different game. It's the little stuff like that, I think, that's frustrating. What you usually see in week 3 is you see offensive lines get rid of that kind of crap. And, they've got veteran guys on this offensive line. Spencer Brown's been around for a long time. He should probably have gotten a piece of him. I'm sure he'd say the same thing. But I expected Michigan State to be sharper as a run blocking operation. But you're not going to be able to win many games in the Big Ten if you do not have a credible run game. I think that was the disappointment today. Michigan State lacked credibility in the run game. Not that it mattered; they were down by so much in the first half. But in
that first possession, if they can run the ball, they can stay.
Possession. But after those first 2 possessions, they go down 7-0 right away. Then they go down 14-0, and then.
And it's clear that the run game is not their friend today. Right. And in Houston, we have a problem.
Exactly. So. And the other thing, too, if you listen to Washington's press conference, one of the things that I think they would prefer, defensive coordinator would prefer, is that Michigan State go with that they have tight ends in there and they don't have a lot of wide receivers out there. So, he was talking about they don't want a ton of wide receiver. In his opinion, the fewer wide receivers are out there, the better for Washington. He felt like Washington's run defense was better than people realized. That they were a little.
That's what surprised me.
That they were close, and
you're talking about his press conference before the game, like 3 days ago, 5 days ago.
He said some things that might have sounded like coach speak back then, but in retrospect, I think he was probably correct. Maybe they were a little bit better than we thought.
Well, they fly people to the ball and they'll go with one deep and they're aggressive. And I've seen them do that. But even against Arizona State and some other games, they fly people to the ball, but they might end up with 2 guys in the same gap and be incorrect. Right. And I was kind of thinking that's undisciplined and unsound, and that can hurt you against good teams. Michigan State's not a good running team right now, so they couldn't hurt them with that. I'm not sure. Maybe they were sound today, but they were not sound all the time. Against Boise State and Tulsa, they averaged, I think Tulsa went for 160 on them and on the ground. And Tulsa, 140 or something like that. So I thought Michigan State, although we didn't see much evidence in the first 2 games that they were a good running attack yet, the question was whether they could harness it in time for this game to maybe, I don't want to say expose Washington, but challenge them there. And Michigan State could not mount anything. But I got to ask you, because they'll be asking about it, the Spencer Brown block. Now, it's not going to be a different game if he gets that block. You don't really believe that, do you?
No, but I don't believe that. I believe that how things start out, I think I'm not saying that I never thought that Michigan State was going to win this game. I've been upfront about that going all the way back to the summer where I felt like this was the toughest game on Michigan State's schedule. And I wrote that in the summer. And I was kind of thinking about, should I put Michigan up there? Should I put Ohio State? But I felt like Washington, because of the combination of experienced quarterback, none better that I've seen than Michael Penix in terms of seeing what's going on, what the defense is trying to do, getting rid of it. And that scheme is such that they really create a lot of stress on you. So, but I do think that if you're able to score coming out of the gate and you're able to score like points on Washington, and if you cross the 50, you're able to score points, it could be a different ball game.
I mean, that mistake occurred 70 yards from the goal line, though.
It occurred 70 yards from the goal line, but it also led to a short field. It led to, and then all of a sudden you're in a hole. Then the next time you get the ball and you have to punt, then you're in a hole. And the punter didn't do a great job, and that's why he was replaced. But I'm saying, like, some things, if you get it done if you have that block, if they somehow get up to the 50-yard line, even if they punt, then you're not in a field position nightmare of a game. And I just feel like you get a short field, it snowballs quickly. You don't do anything on offense. The next time you get it, it snowballs even quicker, and they don't need much time to score.
No.
So what I mean by that is not that I think that Michigan State would have won if Spencer Brown would have got that block. What I mean by that is Michigan State has no chance of being competitive if they're not scoring points. And I think penalties like that or mistakes like that, those are drive killers. And drive killers against this team are killers overall.
Pass protection was bad. That was a surprise. Michigan State's pass protection has been good. Basically, last year it was good. And that play right there showed that it was an indicator that pass protection was going to be a problem. Didn't guarantee it, but it was unnerving for Noah Kim. He took a hard shot there. Took a few hard shots, and then Washington started taking advantage of that. When it was still a game, 14-0, 21-0, whatever it was, before it became a total blowout. There was the one play where, they had already hit him 2 or 3 times, and then they were showing blitz. It was like 3rd and 8 or something, 3rd and 10, 3rd and 9. They're showing blitz, crowding the line of scrimmage. They end up dropping 8 and only coming with 3, and Noah Kim thinks it's blitz, and he throws a little hot route for a 5-yard gain. He's tackled punt. Really had gotten into his head and got Noah Kim to get rid of it instead of going back there and making a read and surveying it a little bit more. That's one thing. Noah Kim has a lot of talent, and he showed his arm on a few passes today that was big time, a few of them still. But if he's going to progress as a quarterback, and I realize he's only 3 games in. I mean, Kirk Cousins 3 games in wasn't pretty. Jim Miller 3 games in wasn't pretty. Tony Banks 3 games in wasn't always pretty. So he's learning as he goes, and one thing in my estimation he'll have to improve upon, he's got good, quick, athletic feet, but he doesn't make good use of that in the pocket. Like if the first read's not open, he's starting to get a little bit of heat. He doesn't really feel the rush and slip and slide because he's got good feet. If he felt the rush, like they always say quarterbacks need to do, that's something. I don't want to say he gets antsy or happy feet or panic, but I guess that's what I am saying. That's that part with his other talent needs to shine instead of getting affected by the pass rush. And the Washington pass rush was an impact today. I realize Braylon Trice is a big-time first-round draft pick guy. He's been quiet so far this year. The guy that made that play, number 4 off the edge, he didn't play last week. He was injured. So there's questions whether he'd be available. Made a big impact right there. And Noah Kim was affected by the pass rush. That surprised me also.
Well, I think going back to the offensive line, it's tough. If you talk about pass protection, there's 2 parts of it. If the interior of the offensive line is getting pushed in, it's hard to step up into the pocket and make plays. And we always hear all the time about, okay, in a pass rush situation, for a guy that's athletic, what you want to do is step up in the pocket and then scramble. I feel like there's not a lot of room for him to operate. I feel like everything's kind of congested, and the offensive line.
That's where he's got to show that he can get mobile and make a play, scramble to pass, because he's got good. He can throw on the run. We've seen that with the waggles, the boots, and he's got a good arm. But that doesn't marry together in a scramble situation yet.
But I also think that there's some things that you can do as an offensive coordinator to help him out. If you know that he can throw off the run, why not roll him out and try to
do that a little bit?
I know, but I mean, in certain situations, if you are affected by, I understand they do that in some situations, but if you're affected by a pass rush, and if you're a little bit antsy, it's maybe do it a little bit more, and then try to get some different things off of it. But it's not just Noah Kim today. It's like it's a lot of different.
Everybody
things.
was a little bit off, and Izzo would talk about distractions, how it hurts a team. And this team had the ultimate distraction this week. Their disposition seemed positive when I was watching them last Sunday and so forth, and you hear good things all week, they come out and they tackle poorly. I mean, Washington's a good offense, but tackling, I mean, Simeon Barrow missed 2 tackles on the opening drive. And then there was the one touchdown where Cal Halliday missed a tackle on that jet sweep to Jeremy Bernard on 2nd and goal from the 4. It was 2nd and goal from the 1, should have been tackled at the 4-yard line. They had it, I mean, it's unbalanced. The guy's in motion. It's on film all the time. They like to run that because Washington is not confident in their ability to run inside in short yardage. They saw it coming. They shifted out, and they were ready for it and defeated a block, got up there and missed a tackle. So missed tackles, that maintained all day, that remained a problem periodically, but it really showed itself early in the game, falling behind 14-0.
I think one of the problems with, people talk about record-setting, giving up record-setting yardage. I don't really look at it that much. Yeah, it's embarrassing. Harlon Barnett is embarrassed. He's a former Spartan, former defensive All-American here, played in the NFL for a long time, almost a decade. Of course, that's embarrassing, but you got to look at it in terms of the parts you can control and the parts you can't control. So the things that you can control is the missed tackles. So if you're giving up those kind of yardage where you're missing the tackle, because the difference between Richmond runs in Central Michigan, everybody runs some of the same plays, right? To clear guys out. Everyone runs receivers deep, and you got underneath route, and that opens up. Against Washington, if you miss a tackle because they have everyone occupied, if you miss a tackle, there's not guys rallying to the ball. You've got similar with Ohio State. They've got such good skill players that every one of them has to be accounted for. And if you're a linebacker in space and you miss a tackle, guess what? That's going a long ways. And that's not the case. That's not the case if you're playing in Richmond. A play that gets out for 15 against Richmond gets out for 40.
Yeah, I got to disagree about everybody. Most teams do run the same plays. There's some exceptions. And 2 years ago, Purdue, when Brown was coaching them with O'Connell or O'Donnell, whatever his name was, and I loved that guy, former walk-on, when they played Iowa, and I saw that Purdue in 2021 beat Iowa, and that guy threw for 375, I got up the next day, and that's the first thing I watched. I'm like, how in the hell did they throw for 375 against Iowa? And I watched it, and that's when I was late to the party on that, and I was like, man, Braum is the real deal. And Michigan, he tore Michigan State up through the air that day too, and Tennessee in the bowl game. But between Purdue and this guy for Washington, they do little things, little 3-man concepts, and they just spring people open. It's impressive that they've got so much volume in the playbook, and they're able to get those guys on the same page to run it with such precision, to just over and over. I mean, they throw for 400 on everybody last year. Will they continue to do it this year? And I wrote yesterday that I didn't think they were as good as last year because I thought the run defense was not as good. The run offense was not as good as last year for Washington. Not that it was great last year. But maybe they're just waiting for a live meet like Michigan State to get their crap together.
I think their offensive line is better. I think they played really well today. And let's not forget about the fact that Washington's coming into the Big Ten, right? And, like all the talk is, and coaches play this up, but they talk about physicality. Of course, Michigan State's going to be a physical team. Michigan State's going to be a physical team. Big Ten, you're going to the Big Ten. Washington came out there, and they were more aggressive, and they were more physical from the jump than Michigan State was. And I think it showed. But their athletes, not everyone.
When they spring receivers open, it's uncommon, man.
But I agree on that. But you look at,
and then even when they're covered, they make great catches.
But you look at like a team like Western Kentucky when Michigan State played them with Bailey Zappi. They had several NFL guys on that team. Bailey Zappi's backup quarterback for the Patriots. They did some cool stuff. Washington's got 3 guys that I'll make an argument that are NFL caliber receivers, a couple big timers. And not only are they fast, not only are they athletic, they've got great hands, they've got great ball skills, but they're physical. Physical through contact. Jaron Mangum had a couple big hits today. Some other defensive backs had some big hits.
And they hung on.
And those look like All-Americans. Those are like old school, Big Ten type receivers, and like you used to see, like first rounders, and they played like it. And the tight end, those receivers create so many issues. That tight end is always one-on-one with the linebacker. In the way that Penix can throw it, he can throw it anywhere on the field on a rope, but he's got that release, like that different angle, and it's just like it's there immediately. Those guys know where they're supposed to be. Everybody runs route. What I like about it is everybody on that offense that runs a route like they're going to catch the ball. Like they're the primary on that, and it's blocked well. It's very, very cohesive.
It's an outfit, man.
And it's
I'll be interested to see how far, who beats them, because I still don't think they're a complete team. They looked more like one today with their ability to stop the run and establish a little bit of run also. It's a handful. There's no, and they got a little luck today too with that. Not that they needed any, but the deflected pass, they catch it. Jordan Hall with a pretty good play to deflect that. Last year when Arizona State beat Washington, Arizona State was 1-4 at the time. Fired coach. Arizona State went 3-9, and they beat these guys. They got a deflected pass, pick six. Right. That wouldn't have made a difference today. But Washington was good. They were sharp. It was the real deal. And Penix is as good. I'll be eager to see what becomes of him at the next level. Not that that's always a true indicator. I think Tommy Frazier is one of the great college quarterbacks of all time. Not an NFL quarterback, but at this level, Penix with that system, just throwing lasers. We talked about that all week, all summer, that they were going to come out here and light it up. The one time when it was 1st and goal from their own 5-yard line, he goes back in his own end zone all day to throw, airs it out. Odunze goes up 50 yards, pretty well covered, and just makes an NFL catch on it. Great ball placement, leaps it, radius, great catch. And then there was just like a 15-yarder out to I think McMillan one time, and it's just 15 yards. It wasn't like the game play, but it was like indefensible. It's on a line and it's high, and Tatum had good coverage on that. Now Michigan State. So people are going to wonder, why are they so wide open on so many plays? Some of it, Michigan State played quarters, some too deep zone to try to stay on top and limit and hit, and they never really got many good clean hits on people. Mangum once or twice, but they, the Norm Parker, Iowa thing is keep it in front, George Perlis, and get a receipt every time, hit hard, and then make them kick field goals. Michigan, these guys
to do that,
were impervious to
do that. You've got to have some sort of pass rush. You've got to be able to you can't just let him sit back there. I'm not saying you're going to sack Penix because he's pretty quick and he gets rid of it so fast, but you have to move him and have to make him move a little bit, and you have to kind of, I know what they wanted to do. They wanted to pen him in and move him off his spot and then kind of force him to throw short. He didn't have to. He didn't have to do that today. And you look at what Michigan State's pass rush is. Last year at this time, Michigan State was number 3 in the country in sacks, coming off that Akron game against a terrible Akron team, and people were wanting to anoint BT Jordan. Oh, he needs to get be $1 million assistant. We need to find a way to lock him up forever. And then similar type situation, where Penix was pretty dang clean in that game out there. Now Barrow, I think, had a couple pressures out there, but today there was not much pressure on Michael Penix at all. And
up and down the checklist: pass protection, pass rush, pass coverage, run game, run defense, everything, special teams, everything was a negative.
Yeah, and then I would say the one positive was Michael O'Shaughnessy as a punter that came on, and he did a nice job with punts. But other than that, maybe Jordan Hall. You can talk about a couple individuals that had decent games. I thought Jordan Hall did. Tyneil Hopper. I liked the way he played before he got hurt. But this was it's a bad look for Michigan State. I know people are out there going to be like, well, everything these guys were saying that, the team is together, the team is looking forward, the team is mission focused. I think they were, but I don't think that you can block out everything that happens, especially when everything is so routine oriented, and if they were playing a different team, if they were playing let's say they're playing Indiana or someone a little bit different.
Northwestern would have been nice today, Paul.
Yeah, absolutely. But you can't get away with all the mistakes that I've never in my life covering college football, almost 20 years, I've never seen anybody have 2 substitution infractions on special teams. And then you go up and down the list. There was like penalty, and there were stupid penalties, for illegal formations.
Monte Brown, that's his name, right? The wide receiver transfer from Nebraska. That's basically the first play of his career in terms of playing wide receiver at Michigan State. He didn't get on the line of scrimmage, and then he had a personal foul on the same play. Tough first play for him. Credit to him. I know he had that injury a couple weeks ago. Glad to see he's healthy.
And he had one of the most boneheaded penalties I've seen. The way you explained it, maybe there's some merit to that, but to get a personal foul on a fair catch,
my guess is that he didn't see the fair catch signal, because when I rewatched it looked like he might have been shielded from that. But you're right.
That's possible, but I think you also have to.
Had to be. That's
I
what it
mean, where the guy was set up inside the 5-yard line. I mean, or inside the 10-yard line. Maybe he didn't see it. You're probably right, but those are one of those really boneheaded penalties that, unfortunate penalties. You call what you want, but that penalty was a killer. It goes from,
there were a lot of them. And, the first play of the game, Washington's – go ahead.
And Washington had a lot of penalties too. So, I mean, this is one of those games where Michigan State had so many penalties. When we talk about Michigan State penalties, Washington had a ton of them too. Michigan State couldn't take advantage of them. And I think going back to some of the, like, Noah Kim stuff, he had some really, really good NFL caliber rope-type passes, but nothing sustained together. No running game. It was every once in a while. And you can't win football games with that. I mean, you could put together a highlight reel of the passes he did complete today, and they were pretty dang impressive. And some of his receivers had good catches as well, but nothing sustained. And it's not just him. Trey Mosley afterwards said the receivers got to run better routes, and there were a lot of times where, I don't want to take the onus off him every time he's way off on the throw, but there's some of those kind of passes where it's like, what the heck is going on there? And it looks like someone ran the wrong route, or two guys are in the same neighborhood, and, that shouldn't be in those kind of route concepts. And so, like you were saying, everybody has fault.
Yeah, and Barnett said they felt like they had a good plan. All coaches do. And again, people are going to wonder, why was everybody so wide open? And, I was charting Michigan State's coverages the whole time, and they started out with, quarter zone, which I thought, two deep zone, different variations of two deep zone. That was what you needed to do to keep a lid on them and hit and make them go 10 plays to score and toughen up in the red zone, all those things. And they tried all those zones, and there was 21-0. They said, okay, let's just play man-to-man, and let's blitz, and let's just see what happens. And that wasn't going to work either, but you could tell that they preferred to try zone. If you go man-to-man, it was more like last year guys were going to would lose a lot of races if that happens. When they were man-to-man one time, Malik Spencer was up in press in the slot, and they ran like a flag route, and he gave up like a 30-yarder. He covered him pretty good and turned and ran, but the guy's an NFL player, and the pass was perfect. And Malik Spencer's a second-year player. So I was curious to see whether Michigan State's young secondary, how they would do against this onslaught of talent. And they tried everything, and nothing worked. First play of the game, though, and believe it or not, I didn't see a lot of guys not on the same page. That was the weird thing. First play of the game, there was a situation. Michigan State went cover 3 on that, and they influenced Dylan Tatum up the sideline, and it got behind him. That's why that guy was so wide open on that. Later on, Angelo Gross had a deal where he wasn't in the flat. It was like a little 12 or 13-yarder, but he ended up next to Jacoby Windman when he's supposed to be out here. Should never have two defensive players that close to each other. But there weren't a lot of those. But the guys were open, not all alone, but open by 5 yards quite often. And then there were times when they were covered and they were catching them. It ran the gamut in terms of offensive nightmare for Michigan State. I don't necessarily think that the pass defense. We'll have to wait and see. Next week, Maryland they'll run tempo, and they'll challenge them with a mobile quarterback that can light it up a little bit. Different style. No, he's not Penix. He's not.
I'll tell you what. We've seen a lot of great quarterbacks. Like Drew Brees back in the day. You covered Michigan State. I didn't at that time, but Drew Brees is pretty amazing. Marcus Mariota, when Michigan State played at Oregon, I thought he was pretty amazing. The other dude from Oregon. We've seen a lot of really, really good guys. A lot of guys that went to the NFL. A lot of guys that had success in the NFL. Russell Wilson and whatnot. Michael Penix, I'd put him up there with any one of those guys. And maybe he doesn't throw as well as Russell Wilson did while moving backwards. I don't think anybody ever could. But he gets rid of the ball so quickly. He throws the ball with such high velocity, and he knows where to go with it. And he's got the best collection of receivers I can think of. You go back to the Ohio State guys. I take Michael Penix any day of the week over a guy like Justin Fields, or some of the quarterbacks that Ohio State has had. The reason I say that is because Michael Penix sees everything. When Justin Fields he had great skill guys around him. He had a good running game, but he was like a 1-2 read kind of guy at college. And he took forever. They had good blocking. He didn't have to do a whole lot. But Michael Penix can do a whole lot of different things in a lot of different ways. He spreads the ball around. He throws deep. He can throw short. He throws with touch. He can throw with different arm slots. He's a really special player, and he didn't really have to use his feet a whole lot, and that's something that he did more when he was a younger quarterback. But he's the real deal, and I think Washington's receiving core is as good as any that I've seen cover Michigan State, and that includes some of the receiving cores that like I think of some of those Oregon teams. I think of some obviously Ohio State teams, but I would take the guys from Washington. Dunn's Jalen Polk, the other dude, and the tight end with that is really special. But the quarterback makes everything work. And they believe in him, and he believes in them, and it's an amazing operation.
I've never heard a quarterback like Harlon Barnett come out be that specific. Maybe not specific about X's and O's, but just running down the list. Their quarterback, their OC, their receivers. Where basically he was saying he didn't come out and say it, but it sounded like he hadn't seen a package like that. You don't hear an opposing a coach talk about the opposing OC. He just mentioned it once. I don't think I've ever heard that before.
And I've never heard that.
In other words, he marveled at their package, pretty much, their offensive package.
Yeah, and I remember going back to when Michigan State played Notre Dame.
Is that the way you took it?
Yeah, much respect. Also disappointed in his guys, obviously, but I mean, Harlon Barnett's he keeps it real. But the one thing I've noticed about Harlon Barnett over the years, as a competitor, he doesn't always like to give a ton of credit, to opponents. I'll give you an example. Like when some of those Notre Dame teams that have had like one or two really good receivers, a borderline NFL guy, maybe an NFL guy at quarterback that gets drafted kind of third round or higher, that some people like, but maybe isn't that great. Barnett will say, hey, they had good personnel. We should have done better in this area, in this area. Today went down through the list. There was no weak spot. And even going back in what D'Antonio was saying, he was talking about the other night at Clarabelle Smith Center. He was saying that he liked Michigan State's plan for those guys, but he was also quietly saying these guys are good. I could tell by his body language that D'Antonio felt like Washington skill players are really good, and I can't think of too many times where Michigan State's faced an outfit like that. They faced outfits with reputations. Even in the Red Box Bowl, that Oregon team, they had some high-powered guys. Stanford, they had a really hyped-up receiving core and a good run game with a hyped-up quarterback or whatever. But this is probably the best all-around group outside of Ohio State. But I've never, what I'm saying makes these guys different is they've got the talent that Ohio State had a receiver, but they've got a quarterback that's more special than what I've seen in terms of what he can do within this scheme. That doesn't mean he's going to do anything more than Justin Fields or Jalen Hurts or anybody else like that at the next level. But within this scheme, he's perfect for it.
All right, the thing that everybody's talking about in the tailgates is the coaching situation. Michigan State's got a coaching vacancy pretty much. Harlon Barnett's trying out to earn the job. This doesn't help him. It's a long season from here on out. But it was interesting how he said, he's got to get back to doing what he needs to do as a coach and not be taking up time with the things that were tugging at his time this week. Well, that's the way it's going to be as a head coach. There's going to be things pulling at your time all the time.
Yep.
These are new things, and that's part of being a coach.
That's part of being a coach, but this week is different. When you look at having to meet with one-on-one for 5 to 10 minutes with every single player on your roster, you're not going to do that as a head coach every week. You're not going to catch a guy like Mark D'Antonio up or try to get him up to speed. You're not going to have to present certain things to talk to all your recruits to try to shore that up, make sure that all your assistants, you're going to have a lot of stuff to do. There's no doubt about that. But this week was a little bit different. And it's one thing to say that, he's going to have a lot on his plate. Of course he's going to have a lot on his plate. But not to have experienced that and to experience like the deep end version of that, like the really a lot on your plate, that's a whole lot different. And he feels, at least my perception of how he feels is that he can return to doing a little bit more of the, defensive backs coaching or, scheme installation, that kind of thing. And I think that's probably likely the case. But the way this thing happened, and then you look at the timing of his press conference. There's a reason why Mel Tucker wanted a press conference on Monday. Because that's a light day. Tuesday is when everyone wears the pads, right? That's when the pads go on, and that's of extreme importance for for your head coach, for everything, the whole operation, and to have to do a lot of media stuff, to have to conduct player meetings, and all that kind of stuff is not easy as far as recruiting.
Move recruiting forward, all that
Exactly.
stuff. So that was a handful. He got Usually when you're a head coach, you got all spring and summer to ease into it. I don't want to say ease into it, but boom, you're head coach on 24 hours notice, 12 hours notice. So he got a big handful, an earful, an eyeful of that whole thing this week, and you can tell that he always respected the undertaking, but even more so now. So now,
and I don't want to disrespect not Bo Wells, but Ross Ells, but I kind of feel like because of Harlon Barnett and what he had to do, everyone talked about T.J. Hollowell being elevated to an assistant coach. Well, he's not helping out with the secondary, and so I wonder, with some of the stuff we saw in special teams today, there's a lot of quality control issues with maybe not enough guys being out there. On one of the returns, Jason Kill pointed out, and I thought it looked pretty wonky, but one of the returns where Terrell Henry tried to take it out of the end zone, it looked like there weren't enough blockers. And I haven't gone back and looked at it, but Jason felt like there were not enough guys on the field. We saw too many guys on the field. We saw not enough guys on the field today. And I wonder if a guy like Ross Ellis, who does coach nickelbacks, if he was trying to lend a hand and pitch in for Harlon Barnett today, or throughout the week. So they got to figure out how they're going to work out as a coaching staff. But I tend not to be reactionary. This is really disappointing, and this is definitely a low point of the season. Well, I wouldn't say it's a low point. I would say Mel Tucker getting suspended and all that stuff last Sunday was a low point. This is a disappointment because you didn't perform as well as you wanted to if you're Michigan State. But
I kind of thought they'd score 21 or 28 points, Michigan State.
I agree, and I felt the same way. But if you can't run the football, if you told me they weren't going to be able to run the football and that Noah Kim was not going to get any kind of protection, and that doesn't work. I mean, we said going into the season, I don't care who's playing quarterback, if it's Noah Kim, Caden Hauser, Sam Leavitt, what have you, they cannot do anything on offense consistently without running the football. That was the whole message of the offseason. So and it's not just the offensive line, it's the tight ends, running back, or wide receivers blocking and whatnot. But that was a disappointment to me. I think that's where it all starts, the run game. Yeah, I thought Michigan State was going to score some points, but I do think there's a way forward from here. They've got to put their best foot forward against Maryland. I felt like if they have the same outcome they had against Maryland last year, that to me, when I look back at last season and you can point to a handful of games that I think are the most disappointing. I understand the Minnesota game because they're coming back from a crushing loss at Washington. They're playing at Minnesota, and that was the best Minnesota was going to be. That was the best Minnesota was here. That was the best Minnesota was all year long. Michigan State was depleted, playing a quart low. They weren't able to stop the run. You had guys that playing in positions they shouldn't have. The run game again. You look at where the run game was last year. They got some respectability as the season went on, I think, but the run game was like really bad going into that Minnesota game. Minnesota had a pretty good defense, stopped the run really well. That wasn't, in my opinion, a low point. The low points to me last year were the Indiana game. Not that Michigan State was good. They were running on fumes and they were like smoke and mirrors to get a defensive line. I get that, but they should have beat that team. Maryland, I don't know what the score was in that, but it ended up being about maybe 40-20, something like that, in that range, or 38-20, 35-20, 35-16. Michigan State was in that game with Maryland, and they did not execute the way they needed to beat a team that I would consider in their peer group. Now, going into the game, I didn't expect Michigan State to win that game, but watching the personnel on the field that day, I thought Michigan State very easily could have won that game. So that was a disappointment to me, as was the Indiana game. Either of those games you win, you're in a bowl game, you're able to make lemonade out of lemons, and you feel a little bit better about yourself. Now this game against Maryland coming up, I think Maryland replaced a lot on defense. I've watched them a couple times, and I would be very disappointed if Michigan State didn't play well against Maryland. Or
they need to win. And Maryland won 8 games last year. They're pretty good.
Right.
And I thought there was a good chance they'd come in here and, that'd be a competitive game. Now, man, Michigan State's got to – they play like this, they'll lose by 3 touchdowns.
No, I don't think they'll play like this. And I don't think Maryland's not the team that – they have to execute better. There's no doubt about that. Michigan State can't afford the boneheaded penalties and all that stuff. And if they have those kind of – all the penalties they had today, or the substitution fractions, all that kind of crap, they lose. I get that. But Michigan State was not capable of beating this Washington team without help from Washington. Washington did not give them help. Washington played its best game of the year. I think they brought their A game. I think they're spectacular today. Michigan State was not beating that team, but Michigan State has the pieces. They need to play well, and they need to beat Maryland. And
if they hang together mentally and physically, is that going to happen? I mean, that's they got
physically. I've got a more of a question physically than I have mentally. You know. I think they'll hang together mentally. Now, there might have to be a situation where if there's a couple guys that aren't in line with where they need to be made an example of. I'm not going to say anything specifically, but if you're a team leader like Trey Mosley or J.D. Duplain and you see something that you don't like or guys aren't all in, they need to take care of that. But I'm not a reactionary. I think that Michigan State, they took one on the chin. I think they will bounce back. I think they have better personnel. On the defense, I know they have better personnel on the defensive line than they had last year at Maryland. Zion Young's a good player. I don't know about Chris Bogle today, but they've got some good players. Washington's defensive line or offensive line was way better than I thought it was going to be today. I think they're going to be. I think they've got to play much better against Maryland. I think they will.
Barnett, this obviously doesn't help his candidacy. He's got 9 more games to go, and everybody knew he'd have to win 7, maybe 8. I'm guessing. I don't know what Alan Haller's thinking. I'm guessing he'll need 7 or 8. Still possible, of course. This was an unnerving beginning. He was unnerved by it, you could see, but he's confident. He wants to get back to work and get ready for Maryland. But some people think he needs to win all the winnable games and pull one upset. That would get you to 9. Then you're 9-3. Right. Doing that, that's really hard to do.
That's going to happen.
No.
Here's my thing with that. Mel Tucker, if he was still here and he won 8 games, if he won 7 games, it would be acceptable because of the schedule that Michigan State plays. There's no reason why Harlon Barnett should be held to a higher standard than Tucker.
But that would be for Tucker to
keep his job.
Keep his job.
I get that. I get
rather
that.
than being hired.
But what I'm talking about, how you judge people isn't on the times like this where you get your brains beat in. You judge those people, those coaches, the motivators, teachers of young men, on how their teams respond to those times. So that's what I'm going to be looking at. That's why I think this game is so important against Maryland. If Michigan State continues to flounder and doesn't fix a lot of what they need to fix and doesn't take significant progress in a whole lot of different areas, then that's a bad sign. But to me, I'm going to judge Harlon Barnett on how his team responds to this. Sure. And he's going to judge himself on that as well.
If Michigan State would have come out here today and lost 34-27 and looked good and looked sharp and looked physical and have the crap together, it's like, okay, they repeat that, they're going to be all right. And I kind of thought that's what we would see. So in terms of the confidence that they were going to beat Maryland, beat Minnesota, beat Nebraska, beat Indiana, beat Rutgers, and then, give it a shot against Iowa in there in the middle of all that. You beat Iowa and you win all your winnable games, you're 8-4. My confidence in that happening really took a hit with this. So if they continue to have problems and lose to Maryland, then you got a problem keeping everybody together, and then the thing could go off a cliff. So it's September, and it's an interim coaching staff, and it's crisis time. I mean, they got to have a great week of practice. As far as health goes, had a couple injuries late with some depth players. Nathan Carter, you pointed out earlier, it looked like he was bothered by an upper body injury from the beginning. We saw during pregame when they just run their little thud on air things. Simeon Barrow came in and hit Carter, and Carter, I've never seen someone get injured in pregame, and I'm guessing it was something that he brought into the game, because he took a knee and Barrow apologized and everything. Then he comes out and Michigan State ran that little trick play, that little late release to him, and Kim missed him, and defender came and kind of clipped him on the way by, and it seemed like it hurt him a lot. He was getting some attention on the sideline. To Carter's credit, came back in the game, made some plays, so he's okay, but the durability of the wearing down process there, when you don't have Berger, you don't have Mangum, that is something else that they don't need in terms of health situations at that position.
Yeah, I don't want to rehash the running back depth thing, but that's something we've been talking about all off season when guys like Eli Collins and whatnot transferred out. And then you look at who they brought in. Carter, tremendous running back. he's the reason, while the run game operation isn't good, I know that he's a better running back than Michigan State had last year at the top of his rotation. There's no doubt about that. And I think even today, even at some of those third and shorts that he was able to pick up, that was the one thing that I thought was pretty solid, where they were able to get even late in the game, but early in the game where it was where last year, if it was 3rd and 3, they'd have to pass it. There's no way they're running the football in that scenario. I thought they did some good things. He's a good back, but you got to have more than one tailback. And Jordan Simmons, I think he's okay against some teams in pass protection, but he's not more than a stand-in. Davion Prim, I don't know. He showed a little bit of something last week before the fumbles, but without Jalen Berger, who's actually really, I think we talk about Noah Kim getting a little bit antsy. No, Jalen Berger's a great safety valve. That
as a receiver,
that anytime you put it near him, he's going to find a way to catch it. I know that Kim was inaccurate on that pass to Carter, but I do feel like Jalen Berger, if he was out there, I'd feel better about the chance for him to catch that. But you don't have Berger, you don't have Mangum. We don't know what's going to happen moving forward, but I don't want to be too hard on Simeon Barrow. I felt like when he came through on that, it was stud, but I think he hit him harder than he should have, and that was dumb. He heard him in pregame. He heard Carter in pregame. He's jacked up. He's excited to play a football game, but that was unnecessary. And it's one of those things.
Not his personality either. He's a smooth guy.
No, yeah, but he didn't play many reps last week, so he's probably ready to get out there. And he apologized to Nathan Carter. Nathan Carter waved him off, said it was okay, waved trainers off, but not a good deal. And I don't know where Michigan State goes moving forward. People are going to say, well, what about the freshman Barber? And good luck with that.
If he's not playing, he's not ready.
Right. And I'll say this: when I talk to his coaches out there and talk to him, he had just as a high school senior started playing running back. He had been a slot receiver his entire high school career to that point, and they gave him a very limited package of what to do as a running back, and he was injured for part of the season. So his, in terms of picking up pass protections, stuff like that, or being able to have the vision that you need at this level on cutbacks. It's one thing to be really fast, to be able to hit a hole, but it's another thing to not have that hole there and be able to cut back, because that's what you have to do at this level. And I don't think he's ready to do that. But it's scary because Michigan State has to get better with the run game to move forward, and I just don't see any way forward getting better without Nathan Carter being the bell cow
and some run blocking. Any thoughts on the coaching situation?
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be it's funny, the same names are out there. Dave Clawson. That's a guy that I just texted my brother the other day. It wasn't my brother, it was a buddy of mine. I said, it looks like Dave Clawson is the new Jeff Tedford, the guy that's on every single coaching list. Harlon Barnett's this is on the job audition tonight was a low point probably in his career, but also something that I think he'll look to rebound from and it be a test of resiliency. And I think he's a competitor, and I think he's going to look to try to move the team forward. But there's a lot of guys out there, and it's an interesting time because I'm not familiar with all the hot coaching candidates. I do know some of the guys that I've seen over the years where I'm like, man, this guy's better than people realize. I was telling you, the Georgia Southern coach, and they lost to Wisconsin today. They took it on the chin. They were competitive early, but I liked some of the operational stuff that they do. I like Toledo's coaching staff. I like some of the names that are out there, like Elko and, like a lot of different stuff out there. But Michigan State, one of the things I've learned over the years is you have to find the right fit for this university. We've seen some of the things at Wisconsin in recent years. Not right now with Luke Fickell. I think they probably got that right. But bringing in an Oregon State coach, or bringing in or someone else bringing in a hot name, Michigan with Rich Rodriguez, or something like that. You've got to find the right fit for your program, and that's what I'm going to kind of be looking forward for. I didn't, in some ways, looking back at Mel Tucker, I don't think he was the right guy for the program. He was, in my opinion, a lot more flash, a lot more winning a press conference or winning a graphic, if that's possible, winning on Twitter, with some of the perception equals reality stuff. And I know that the perception of a program is important. I understand that recruiting rankings are important and all that, but I think Michigan State needs authenticity. I think they need someone that kind of believes in hard work and fundamentals and player development.
He said he was in favor. Every coach says they're in favor of that, but
right.
I hear what you're saying.
But you're saying, okay, you can say you're in favor of player development, but then at running back, we're talking about running back issues right now. Use that as an example. We're talking about Davion Prim. He's been in the program for 3 years now, and this is the case at a lot of different positions. They've had 9 or 8, 9, 7, sometimes 10 defensive backs classes. Where's the development, or are you just recruiting to replace guys that you didn't develop? And I think there's a mercenary aspect, and maybe that's just some of the portal stuff. But you have to have player development. You have to have guys like Derek Harmon, guys like Simeon Barrow, guys like Cal Halliday. You just can't be like a free agent team. I look at like Major League Baseball, and there's teams out there that are very good in the free agent market, but they also have good farm systems. And I think in today's climate, you got to be able to do a little bit of everything. You got to do both. But Michigan State was very transactional, very mercenary. And when you're bringing in that many transfers every year, sure, some of those guys are great guys. But it creates, I think, a transactional environment. I think Michigan State needs to get back to player development and community and unity and that type of thing, as much as and supplement your recruiting, supplement stuff with that. And I think one of the things that Harlon Barnett said in his coaches show this week is talk about the 5-hour radius, the relationships with high school coaches. I'm not going to sit here and crap on Mel Tucker and talk about how high school coaches weren't really in the loop in a lot of instances, but some of Michigan State's best players in the D'Antonio era weren't guys that Michigan State was recruiting directly. They were guys that were brought up to them by high school coaches when they were looking at someone else. And I think Michigan State really, really kind of missed the ball on some of the relational recruiting aspects and some of the community aspects that come with recruiting a territory. And I think you can still recruit. Like Harlon Barnett's a good example. His primary territory was always like that Dayton, Cincinnati area. High school coaches loved him. He also had some areas of Flint and stuff like that. High school coaches loved him there. They also loved him in Georgia and Florida. And so you can have multiple areas. You can recruit nationally, but building those relationships, building that trust. So coaches will be like, want to go to bat for you and trust you with their players. That's really important, and I think that Michigan State needs to get back to that. I think that's really important for whomever takes over as the head coach at Michigan State.
I agree. All that stuff and making better use of your camp and getting word out to campers all over the Midwest that if you come here, you will get evaluated, and the head coach will be on the field watching everybody. So whether it's Barnett or someone else, but they need to win next week. So if they don't win next week, the chances of Barnett putting together a good enough season to keep the job are going to be seriously diminished to just 2 games, but it won't look good.
And I'm not saying that Barnett is the guy. I'm not saying that by any means, because he believes the community aspect of building relationships. There's lots of guys out there that are like that. And, I look at, like, I'm not pumping Toledo either, but I look at that roster, the way that thing is built. I look at the way D'Antonio built the Cincinnati team, guys from Detroit, guys from all over Ohio, that type of thing, and they had a lot of NFL guys. You look at Michigan State's first recruiting class under D'Antonio, lots of NFL guys in there. Kirk Cousins is still playing, but so you can do it in a lot of different ways, but you can't get away from the relational aspect. And I think they've got to resist being mercenary, because when you have a mercenary kind of approach to football, then your players are going to be mercenary to you. If everything's NFL, or that type of thing, then if they're going to take plays off.
All right. Good stuff, Paul. Anything else? We'll wrap it up. Appreciate everybody watching. Everybody stick with SpartanMag.com as we cover Michigan State as they move forward and figure out what's next for their program. There'll be clues along the course of the season as Alan Haller and everybody else watches to see if Michigan State's doing enough for Harlon Barnett to remain Michigan State's coach into 2024. It's going to be interesting every step of the way. This was a big step backward. Got to get it recovered and get it headed in the right direction. And I expected Michigan State to play better today. Barnett did too, but there were serious distractions, unprecedented. So now they got to regather themselves and play a very good team. Luckily for Michigan State, it's at home, and it's not a must-win, but gosh, it's going to be a litmus test like we thought, but even more so than I thought.
Can I say one more thing? Just I'm long-winded tonight, but the 2014 Rose Bowl team was out there. And I was watching those guys on the sideline, and Rico Cooney was sitting next to us, and I said, how many of these guys, I'm like thinking of Tawan Jones, Benny Fowler, Trey Waynes, Darquez Denard. How many of these guys that are out here celebrating a 13-1 season that culminated with back-to-back wins over top 5 teams? That Big Ten championship game against Ohio State is still one of the most physical, bloody games I've ever seen in my life. Then beating Stanford in the Rose Bowl. How many of those guys would not be on the roster today?
If what?
If they had come to Michigan State as campers under,
how many of those guys would Mel Tucker have recruited?
Yeah, because I'm thinking of guys like Tawan.
None of the ones you just mentioned.
Right, and I'm thinking like those guys are NFL guys. Yeah, the Lawrence Thomas out there, Tucker probably would have made a run at him, but maybe Lawrence Thomas isn't. Maybe Lawrence Thomas isn't on that team if other guys from Detroit Renaissance that Michigan State recruited, guys like Mylon Hicks, or other 3-star guys, or Chris Norman. Maybe those are guys that get ignored. And I think of Benny Fowler, kind of the ripple effect, or I think of Keyshawn Martin, the excitement that went through camp with Benny Fowler when he had his camp out here.
Nobody knew who he was. He showed up.
Yeah,
who's that guy?
A basketball track guy. I think there's lots of guys like that, and like a Kyler Ellsworth is a walk-on, but Darian Harris. Mark D'Antonio had a great relationship with the head coach of DeMatha. He still does. Do those relationships? I think that Michigan State doesn't win a Rose Bowl if they had a mercenary approach like they did now. It's about player development. It's about getting guys that can develop into NFL players, or you believe can develop into NFL players. But you got to do some work to get them there. You got to make them believe that they can get there, but you also have to make them believe in you. And there's a lot of development that goes into them. It's a commitment.
Tucker tried it a different way, and it was a noble undertaking. It was ambitious. It was interesting to see if Michigan State could do it that way. He came in having recruited at Alabama and Georgia, thinking, I'm going to recruit this way at Michigan State. I'm going to get it done. And he learned as it went along. It was harder maybe than he thought and other things. But it was worth a try. It was interesting to see. But you're right. For Michigan State, you better make use of every stream that you've got. And that part of that is the camp. Part of it is just turning over all the stones locally before, don't make sure you don't make any mistakes close to home when you're going out.
And don't alienate high school coaches. I mean, so if it's a transactional type thing, you recruit a guy and then you tell him, hey, we like you, you're going to fit perfect for our system, you're a red zone mismatch tight end, and then you just cut him loose. Guess what? You're not going back into that school, in my opinion, and getting a guy. Especially if you're not dealing with a high school coach in the first place and being up front with them. That's just not how it works. So. But hey, I'll say no more.
It's a great atmosphere today, great weather. Tailgating was great. I was over there watching the players walk in, the Spartan walk. I had video of that here on the channel. That was amazing. The crowd was great when they showed Harlon Barnett coming through the tunnel. The crowd roared, and then D'Antonio was bringing up the rear. And by the time D'Antonio got to the sideline, when the video board showed D'Antonio, crowd went crazy. Great atmosphere.
Dorsey got his Thunderstruck.
Thunderstruck. They played that, and I think that was pretty well received. But the team just did not show up. Partly somewhat understandable. The opposition was great. Distractions, like Izzo would say, this week were unprecedented. But now, everything toward Maryland, there's a lot on the line. It's just one game. Michigan State's 2-1, but it'll be very important from a directional standpoint as to where this thing's headed and whether Barnett's got a chance, frankly.
Absolutely.
Anything else, Paul? For Paul Konyndyk, my name is Jim Comparoni. Been watching the VCast from Spartan Stadium with the Spartans for SpartanMag.com.